Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Women in Leadership Talk podcast. Today, we have Renee Bauer joining us all the way from Connecticut. Renee, thanks for being here today.
Thanks for having me. This is going to be fun.
Yeah, we're excited to have you. And there's so many things I'm already just getting antsy about having a conversation on all the different books you've written. So before we jump in, though, let me, welcome our audience. Thank you so much for being here and joining us. We know you have a choice as to what podcast you listen to. So we're super grateful that you choose Women in Leadership Talk. And let me give you some info on Renee so you have a sense of who we're even talking to today. So Renee has been a divorce attorney for over 20 years, and I guarantee you she's been really busy, especially since the pandemic. She's the founder and managing partner of Happy Even After Family Law, which is located in Connecticut. She's also the co-founder of a platform for tarot card readers called the Tarot Bridge, and I really want to hear about that too. She's also an international speaker and author of 3 books, Divorce in Connecticut, The Ultimate Guide to Solo and Small Firm Success, and a children's book called Percy's Imperfectly Perfect Family. She hosts an annual She Who Wins Summit. It's a live event created to inspire, motivate, challenge women to move forward bravely in their personal and their business lives. Her impact has been recognized by Success Magazine, where she was nominated as a Woman of Influence and with awards such as the Litigator of the Year, Women Owned Business of the Year, New Leaders in the Law. She's also been featured in multimedia outlets such as the International Business Times, Comment Central, AP News, NBC, Fox, and iHeartRadio. And I could go on and on and on about your awards and publications. And so, Renee, thrilled to have you. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to talk about all of the things today.
Good. Well, let's start maybe from the beginning. So what led you into law, and then what's led you to where you are today? And when I think about the 3 books you've written, quite the variety, and I'm excited because you're using all parts of your brain. Quite excited to hear what prompted each of those for you.
Oh my gosh, we'll be here all day. No,
Yes.
I'll give you the abridged version. So I actually did not want to go to law school. My plan was to be a lobbyist. So go figure, like going way back, I thought I wanted to work in politics. And it's so funny because I look at life now and I look at who I am and I realized had I gone down that road, like I would have been chewed up and spit out. Like I didn't have the stomach to be in DC. But that's why I ended up going to law school, was because I planned on having a career in politics and I wanted to work on the Hill and then go into lobbying. And I went to law school and did an externship and actually loved working with people. And I'm like, well, you know what? Let me try doing this law thing and see what happens. And when I started practicing, I never looked back. And so my career as a divorce lawyer has sort of bobbed and weaved from insurance defense to criminal defense, and then finally settling in about 3 years after I started practicing into family law. And that's what I've been doing ever since. And it was an opportunity to help someone who was going through the most difficult times in their life. So that was my trade. One of the books I wrote was about starting and opening a law firm. I've been an entrepreneur for as long as I can remember. Like I was the kid with the lemonade stand, like that's part of who I am, as much as I have been a writer for my whole life. So writing and books were inevitable. It was just like, what are they going to actually be about? So I took my first dipping my toe in was like, okay, how to run a law firm. And then it was, okay, divorce, because that's what I do. And then it was like a children's book about divorce. And the book that came out recently, She Who Wins, I took all of that experience and I'm like, what trend have I seen over the 20 years with women who come into my office? And I realized that so many women have the same problems, and it's worthiness issues. Women aren't talking about money. They're not having uncomfortable conversations because it's easier to sweep it under the rug than to address it. They're afraid to take risks. They're putting everyone else above themselves. They're people pleasers. The boundaries are blurred. I'm like, that's the book. I'm like, that's the next book. It was like everything I had been doing all of this time led up to that. And then I realized, Vicki, I'm like, actually, the book is for the woman who I used to be and the unfolding that I have gone
Mm.
through in my adulthood. I'm twice divorced. I had shame. I never talked about it. I had imposter syndrome. I was a perfectionist. I had like all of those things. And it was like, I had worked through all of that. Let me take another woman who I know there are so many of them out there through that same journey let me teach you how to kind of work through that, but also do it in a really relatable way that I throw myself on the line. I share stories of myself some are embarrassing, some are funny, some are heartbreaking. And I'm like, because I'm just like every other person out there, just trying to get through, each day, raising your kids, a relationship. And so that's the next phase. And it's like, I'm 46 years old right now. And it's like, I've gone through all of these things and you can pivot every step of the way. And I love that. Like you can reinvent yourself and pivot and do new things. And you don't have to just follow one path just because there's something on the wall that says you earned a certificate in that.
Wow. You said so many things there I want to go back and like tap into, because let's start there, right? Like something you just shared with being able to pivot, and you can have multiple careers, multiple versions of your life, and that's okay. We don't have to stay the same forever. And so I really love, Renee, that you've said that, and taking your experiences and have turned that into something that can help others. And that takes excuse my language, a hell of a lot of courage to be so vulnerable and just show up so fully, right? Because we don't like to share the scars. We don't like to share, things that are uncomfortable or hard. But good on you, because what's the benefit of doing that?
Right. And let me tell you though, I was so private. I was like, someone will look at like what I put out on social media and they're like, what are you talking about? You're private. I was so private. Like I didn't want people to see any of that because I thought it was unprofessional. I didn't want people to think that they hired a divorce lawyer who's twice divorced. And like it was like, what are people going to think of me? And then I realized I wasn't helping anyone. And when I actually started to talk about my divorce, I was kind of forced into it through a podcast interview with a friend. She didn't tell me we were talking about that, but she offered me sushi and some drinks. So I said yes. And right. Like,
Definitely sign me up.
yeah. And I was like, that's it. I'm like, okay, you can put the mic on me and ask whatever you want. But it was the first time I was put in a position to actually talk about my scars and my pain. And when the episode came out, people reached out to me and was like, thank you for sharing that. Thank you for being so vulnerable. And then I realized I'm not vulnerable. I'm actually the opposite of vulnerable. But wait a second. This was just a moment when I was. What happens if I do more of that? What if it got easier and easier and easier to be vulnerable, to drop the perfectionism, which I'm definitely a recovering perfectionist, and just say, who cares if you fail? Who cares if it's not perfect? Like you just do it and show up anyway, because someone needs to hear that message.
Well, and that's such an important attitude as well, because if we are designing our lives to please everybody else, the biggest person to be disappointed is us, right?
Yeah.
And so when you can share, even if it impacts one person, and that's how I believe, with the podcast that I have here, if it impacts one person, we have done our job. If one person can say, let me just show up a little bit more fully today and share some of my scars, then we've done a great job.
Yeah.
So
and that's how I felt. Oh yeah.
No, go ahead.
That's how I felt about the book too. It was like, if I was just one reader who it resonated with, then I know that it was worth all of the journey to get that book written and published.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I'm sure there's been many copies sold. So let's talk a little bit about perfectionism, because this comes up a lot with the clients that I work with. Oftentimes we're not even recognizing that we have, a little bit of that perfection syndrome going on. We just expect things to be a certain way, and we won't take that risk. I mean, you mentioned that earlier. A lot of the women you're working with are afraid to take risks, or they're afraid of that uncomfortable conversation. So how was perfectionism showing up for you?
Yeah. So if you roll time back about 3.5, 4 years ago, I decided that I was going to put some videos out on social media, and I'd never done it before. I spent the entire day picking out, lining up my wardrobe, getting the camera out, filming, And when I tell you, I probably spent 8 hours filming what was supposed to be like 30-second or 60-second clips and deleting all of it because I
Mm.
said, too much. It wasn't perfect. And I was like, well, I'm not going to get anywhere if I keep up with this, with doing it this way. And I had to drop that. And so I am the perfectionist. Like I was the person who, if I wasn't going to do it really well, I didn't want to do it. I didn't want to be a beginner. Like I wanted to show up and be like, yes, like I know what I'm doing, or I have it all together. And it's funny because I think the unrolling of perfectionism has been a journey, and it's something from year to year I can look back and be like, it's still unfolding. And now it's like I'll hop on a podcast and some days I'm like, you know what, I'm not gonna wash my hair today, and maybe I'll throw some lip gloss on, but this is the version that you get of me today. You got my showered and makeup version, but it's like, you know what? It's like, but that's the real version, because the reality is, you know what? We can't always have it all together all the time. And it's like, it was so liberating to let go of that need to always feel like you have to be perfect, on point, have it together, have a script. Like it could be messy. Like there's so much beauty in the messiness of it all.
It's so true. It's so true. And, it's also putting it into perspective, right? That, you're perfect, that 100% is probably like 150% to somebody else, right? Like they're
Yeah.
going, oh my God, Renee's got it all together. Like, and inside you're going, oh my God, no, I don't. And I need to be doing this. And, it is important that we step back and ask ourselves, when is it enough? Right.
Yeah.
And how do you know? How do you catch yourself and say, yay, you know what? I was okay to let that go at 80%, right? And
Yeah.
that 80% was enough.
Right, right. Well, I mean, and isn't 80% done better than nothing? Like, I mean, because how
Exactly.
how many of us are like stuck? We're paralyzed because we want it to be so perfect.
Yeah. And so I just want to tag into that because that comes up oftentimes with clients around asking for what they want, right? And my philosophy is if you don't ask, you don't get, right? So you got a 50-50 chance, right? 50, if you
Right.
ask, you got a chance of somebody saying yes or no. But if you don't ask, you got zero chance. So it is really about, taking that risk, perceived
Yeah.
risk, and asking, but what are the benefits, right?
Yeah.
Like, just like you said, now you can show up fully, whether you have makeup on, whether it's a hair wash day or not, you get to
Right.
show up more fully as to who you are.
And it's like, what happened? Who cares if it's a no? Who cares? Like, eventually, all of the no's will turn into a yes.
Yeah.
If you ask enough and you're gritty enough and you have that tenacity, like, eventually you're going to hear that yes. So who cares? Someone is saying no. Okay, roll it off your shoulders and move on to the next ask.
Yeah. But sometimes it's hard for people to do that, right? Because they take that very personally, and there can be a
Yep.
gazillion reasons why it's no today. And often it has nothing to do with you. And
Yeah.
so if you can step back and recognize it's not about you personally, it could be something else that's going on, which is why you got to know today.
Yeah. And I always look at it like, um, I take this perspective of like, I'm not begging for a seat at somebody else's table. If it doesn't feel aligned for them and that's a no, okay, I'll move on to someone who it's a hell yes for, because that's the energy that I want. I don't want to have to like convince someone
Yeah.
to listen to me or have like it's just not. I'm like, no, like it's not. I mean, listen, I'm too old for that. Like I'm not doing that. I'm not standing in line at the club anymore. Like no, it's like it's no, it's either this feels really good and it feels aligned and it's a yes and let's go with it, and you remove the emotion from all of the others, because if we don't put ourselves out there, then we're never actually going to move the needle or get what we want, because we're too afraid. We're too afraid of the rejection. And like, I think rejection is an awesome word. Like, I think we need to celebrate it because it means that you're actually going for something and you're doing something scary and you're pushing through the fear. And you're not allowing that to hold you back. And like a rejection is like, yeah, congratulations for going for it.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're building that muscle, right?
Yeah.
So you keep getting better and better at how you ask and figuring out who do you want to ask, to your point, right? Who do you want in
Yeah.
your camp? Are you in alignment with that person? Yeah, I love that. So tell us a little bit about She Who Wins. So you've just launched this book, right?
Yes. Yep.
Okay, give us the skinny and tell us why all of us women need to be reading this book.
So it was, I'm a reader. I read a ton of self-help and personal development, along with other stuff. And I love fiction. I love storytelling. And as I was reading book after book of self-help, I felt like there was something missing. Like I was
Mhm.
tired of you should be doing all of these things and I did it this way and you should do it like that. Was like, well, wait a second. Everyone has different stories. Everyone has different strengths. And then it was like, I would read them and I'd be like, but where is as a writer, I'm like, where's the voice in there? Like, I want to hear that I want to like picture the author. I want to be put into their story, into their life. And so it was so important to bring storytelling into the book and like use that like the feedback has been people start it and they finish it like they don't get up. They just keep reading and reading and reading
Oh,
because
congratulations.
which is right, which is like I'm like, well, then I did my job because I want someone to be able to easily read it and take something from it and feel inspired. And I teach a framework in there that is so easy and simple for someone to follow anytime they get to a point where they're stuck. And it's like I want them to be able to recognize it, through my stories, like, oh, I had that same struggle. I had the same struggle with worthiness or for asking for what I wanted or from money, lack mindset. And that was the inspiration for it. And the funny thing is, as I started writing it, I started to peel back all of the layers that I
Mhm.
thought that I was totally healed. I thought that there were like things from my childhood and teenage years that I tucked away and were all forgiven and they weren't. And I'm like, wow, this still came up for me. I'm like, it's really buried deep. I'm like, if something like this came up for me, I bet you someone else out there has that same thing that they've buried. And let's talk about that. And so, the feedback has been it's relatable. And that was what I wanted to create was just I wanted something to make someone laugh. I wanted to make them cry. I did. I'm like, if I can move someone to some sort of emotion, then I did the job that I set out to do. And I just wanted to be moved because those are the books that I love.
Yeah, no, that I love that. And just what you were saying about the healing process you went through the writing itself, like that's such a therapeutic and acknowledgement or validation to what you've experienced, right? It's
Yeah.
not a bad thing. Like most people try to push that stuff down because they don't want to have to deal with it. But once you acknowledge it's even there, you can't go
Yeah.
back, right? Like you
Yeah.
you got to go
Yeah.
forward.
Yeah.
And so that's awesome that you were able to do that, and especially through your writing. And so where do people find She Who Wins? Is it on Amazon?
Yep.
Okay.
And
Amazon, major
Amazon, Barnes
bookstores.
and Noble. Yeah. All of the regular places you can buy books.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about the Tara Bridge. Okay. So I want to hear all about this. Tell me.
Isn't it funny? It's so random. And what I love about it, it's like people are like, you're a divorce lawyer and you do what? Like, so I have a good friend. I actually gonna change that. I used to say I'm not a tarot card reader, but I'm learning. So I'm a beginner tarot card reader. But I have a friend who's been reading tarot cards for 40 years. She's very good at it. I've always had readings throughout my life. And she recognized that in the digital space, there wasn't a really good place for people to go to get readings that weren't filled with scammy
Mm,
stuff. Like there's a
mm,
lot of like pay by the minute, or you don't know what you're getting, or people saying that they can promise spells and all of this like icky stuff. And she's like, I want to create a space where people can go for because they would come to her for love issues or money issues or career, and they want validation and they want guidance. And sometimes it's just about helping them tap into what they already know is true and kind of confirming that for them. So we launched a tech company called the Tarot Bridge that is it's a safe space. It's nothing out there that like you're not going to have anyone keeping you on the phone because so that you pay more. Like all of the readers are fully vetted by her. So she's like super picky about who she lets on there. She actually does test them herself because we wanted a really safe space for someone to go because especially women, a lot of women turn to tarot cards when they're having life struggles. And So that's what in 2023, we launched that in the spring. And so we're in the process of continuing to build that. And within all of that, I decided to learn how to read myself. So I'm sort of dabble. I don't do it for money. I do it for fun and for myself.
Good for you. So I hear, like, I said this earlier, you using all sides of your brain,
Yeah.
right? And so, many facets that you can tap into. And that goes back to what you were saying earlier about when life kind of throws you those curveballs, like how to pivot, right? And
Yeah.
find other avenues that we can tap into to, fulfill us. And ultimately, like, we're on this planet, let's live it well.
Yeah, and have a little fun. And like, for the recovering perfectionist who want to do everything perfectly, I'm not like, now I'm like, I'm a student of stuff. Like, I didn't know how to start a tech company. I had to learn that, and we made some mistakes when we were first launching it. I'm like, but I'm learning something, and that's fun. It's fun to explore something new.
Well, and that's, again, that's a different perspective, right? Because most of us think, oh gosh, we got to know everything. And if we don't know
Mhm.
everything, we're not going to put ourselves out there because it'll be a failure, or what if this happens or that happens? And, if you can shift that mindset to, well, what if this becomes the next hot app, the next
Yeah.
hot tech, right? Like that everybody's
Hmm.
hot after, like, if you don't put it out there, you're
Yeah.
never going to know. So
Yeah.
that's terrific. And
Yeah.
so, Renee, let's just stick to that for a few minutes. So you've done quite a few things. I mean, you have a law business, you've written several books, you've set up this Terra Bridge. So when you're ready to make a pivot, how do you know? How do you know?
Mm. It, you, you know what's so beautiful about this question? It's exactly where I am right now. So I'm in a exit from my company, the law firm that it's been my life and my livelihood for 20 years. And I was holding on. I was holding on because it was like I had this doubt. It was like, well, what if I leap and there's nothing there to catch me?
Mm,
Like, what does the other side look like? Like, this is my financial stability. This is the thing that I know is steady and true. So if I make this leap, what happens? And so I'm exactly in that space. And I keep going because I still have those moments where I'm like, oh my God, what am I doing? And I just keep going back to, for me, it's you don't have the space to do the next thing that you're meant to do so long as you hold on so tight. There's only so much space in your life. And for me, I know what I don't actually know what it looks like on the other side. I just know that there's more. I know that my purpose is expanded now, and there's more for me to do. And I have to let go in order to do that, or I'm doing a disservice to myself and my own life. So I try really hard to turn off my brain, like my rational side that's like trying to keep me safe, and the rational, practical one. I try to turn that way down, that voice, and say, just go with your gut and what you know is true. And like, I always go back to Vicky. I'm like, when I get to those moments where I'm like really white knuckling it, I think to myself, I'm like, if I'm on my deathbed, do I want to look back at my life and be like, what would have happened if you leapt at this point in your life when you were 46? If you made that decision, like what would have, if I didn't do that, would I've always wondered where would have my life have turned out? What more could I have accomplished or done, or that was, tapping into my creativity that I stifled because I held on for fear. So I always go back to that moment, and I don't ever want to look back and have regrets that I didn't go for something because I was scared.
yeah, I love that. So you use that fear to propel you. No regrets. I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's such an important aspect of being present in anything that we do, right? Because that fear is usually temporary. So you gotta, I like that Susan Jeffers book. I don't know if you ever read that, Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway, Susan Jeffers.
Mm.
It's so true. And if you can find that push inside of you to go after what you're looking for, then you don't have
Yeah.
regrets later in life.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. So Renee, what would be two things that you would want to share with our audience that could help them think about it later and say, I am happy, even after even after all this has happened?
I would say, for me, the two things that I see show up for myself and I see for other women and clients I had, there's two. Anytime you get to that point when you're trying to make that decision, you're wondering whether you leave the relationship or leave the job or leave the house, like whatever it is the first step is to really get clear on what it is you want and pay attention to whether, like I was just saying, whether your head is overriding what your heart and your intuition is telling you. I think that, we are so intuitive, and especially women are so intuitive. And anytime I've ever ignored that intuition or that nagging feeling, I always came back to regret it. And I was like, oh, it was there. And I ignored it anyway. So it's really get quiet and pay attention. And sometimes that means writing it down, like writing down all the things your head's telling you, and then writing down all the things your heart's telling you, and pay attention to your heart and your intuition. So that will tell you what you need to do. And then the next thing is to acknowledge and identify the excuses that are holding you back, because that's the phase where everyone gets stuck and they'll say, I really want this, but I can't do it now. I'll wait until the kids are older. I have more money. I lose 10 pounds, like whatever it is write the excuses down so you can look at them and then cross them off and say, I'm not allowing them to make my decisions for me anymore. And those are the first two steps to move into whatever it is that you want. And most people get stuck there though. And they waver back and forth between the two before they actually take any sort of action.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's great advice. Like ignoring your gut usually comes back to haunt you.
Yep.
Pay attention. What's it telling you? What's like, don't ignore it. You don't have an upset tummy. Like, it's actually talking to you. And then acknowledging the excuses. I think that one is the hard one because people often aren't aware of the fact that they're making excuses. And so that's where it's really important to have a friend that you can lean on and say, hey, where do you see me stopping? Right? Like, what do you see those barriers for me? Or get coaching or get somebody, who's a professional that can help you really start to identify what those excuses are and why. Why are they there? Because there can be a lot of baggage with that.
I just this morning I had a phone call with a good friend of mine. I love her to death, and I needed some business advice, and I went to her, and she called me out. She's like, "Stop giving away your worth, like your value. There's a price tag to that." And I was so quick to try to make things work and make it nice, and she's like, "Stop it." And I was like, "Oh, damn, she's right." And it was like, but having someone say that, then I could go back and I looked down and then I listed all of the things, all of the value, all of the offerings. And I'm like, you're right. There is a price tag to that. And that's my time and it's worth something.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And your experience, right? Your experience has led you to where you are today.
Right.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. This has been a great conversation. Just a reminder to our audience, She Who Wins is on the bookshelf or Amazon digitally. You can get your book. And also check out Renee's other books, right? The other one that really caught my eye was Percy's Imperfectly Perfect Family. And divorce is at an all-time high, and kids are the ones who oftentimes get caught in that web. And so I'd be excited to read that one myself.
Yeah. Thank you. This has been an absolute pleasure. It was so much fun chatting. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, my pleasure. And I want to thank our audience. I appreciate you chiming in today. And if you have questions for Renee, you're curious about, how she's, gone into more detail, but how she has made these transitions and how she uses multiple parts of her brain, reach out to her. Renee, where can they find you?
If anyone's on Instagram, they can find me there at Ms. Renee Bauer, or head on over to my website, which is at msreneebauer.com.
Awesome. There you go. You got it. So thank you everybody for joining us today. And we look forward to seeing you at the next WIL Talk podcast. Have a great day.